Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're getting into a really quite a complex and sensitive debate unfolding in the UK. It's about the potential ban of non-stun animal slaughter.
Yeah, and it's hitting headlines because a public petition really gained traction, leading to a parliamentary debate scheduled for June 9th. So, very timely.
It touches on so much, doesn't it? Animal welfare, religious freedom, cultural identity.
Absolutely. And for this dive, we've looked at quite a range of sources. We've got news reports from places like GB News and Roya News, research from the HDB, that's the Agriculture and Horticulture Development Board,
Right.
and perspectives from the RSPCA, reports from the House of Commons Library, and also an article from Five Pillars offering sort of a community viewpoint.
Okay. So our aim here is to really unpack what these different sources are telling us, laying out the various arguments and facts as neutrally as possible.
Exactly. No taking sides, just exploring the information.
So let's start at the beginning. What exactly is non-stun slaughter? Can you break that down?
Sure. At its core, it's the method of slaughtering an animal by making a cut to the throat without stunning the animal unconscious beforehand.
And this is specifically linked to religious practices.
That's right. It's the required method for kosher meat in the Jewish faith, known as shechita, and it's also used by some Muslims for halal meat, though not all, which is a key point we'll come back to.
And the sources mention specific requirements for it to be considered religiously compliant, don't they?
Yes. Things like the animal must be alive and healthy at the point of slaughter. The blood must be drained completely. A very sharp knife must be used to ensure a rapid cut, and often a blessing is recited. That comes through in the Five Pillars and GB News reports.
Okay, so now the push for a ban, where is that coming from mainly?
Well, the driving force behind the petition and the main argument against non-stun slaughter centers on animal welfare.
The petition itself used pretty strong words, didn't it? Calling it barbaric.
It did. Barbaric and incompatible with modern-day values. That's the language highlighted by the Parliament Committee's source. It reflects a strong ethical stance.
And organizations like the RSPCA are very vocal on this. What's their specific concern?
Their primary argument is that cutting the throat without prior stunning causes avoidable pain, fear, and distress. They cite evidence suggesting animals remain conscious for a period after the cut.
How long are we talking?
Well, their figures suggest it can vary, maybe 5 to 7 seconds for sheep, but potentially, 20 seconds or even up to 2 minutes for cattle before they lose consciousness. They argue this constitutes significant suffering.
And they believe stunning prevents this.
Exactly. They say stunning induces immediate unconsciousness, so the animal doesn't feel the cut or the subsequent blood loss. The British Veterinary Association shares this view, calling for stunning based on welfare concerns.
So the RSPCA's position is mandatory stunning for all and clear labeling if meat isn't stunned.
That's their stance, yes. They want consumers to be able to make an informed choice.
Okay, but then there's the other side of the coin, the religious freedom argument.
Absolutely. For observant Jews practicing shechita and some Muslims adhering to specific halal requirements, non-stun slaughter isn't just a preference. It's seen as a fundamental religious obligation, a divine commandment.
And they feel the barbaric label is unfair.
Yes, the Five Pillar source, for instance, raises the concern that this narrative can feel like cultural othering, basically targeting the practices of minority faith communities. They also emphasize that Islamic tradition itself includes strict rules about animal welfare during slaughter, the sharp knife, the skill. It's all meant to minimize suffering within the practice.
And a ban would presumably make it very difficult for these communities to get meat that meets their religious standards.
It would, yeah. Concerns highlighted in Roya News and GB News include having to rely on potentially expensive imports or simply not being able to access religiously compliant meat easily. It's a major access issue for them.
But here's a really important point that came up in the sources. When we talk about halal, it's not all non-stun, is it?
No, not at all. And this is crucial. Figures from the RSPCA, Five Pillars, and the House of Commons Library all suggest that the vast majority of halal meat produced in the UK, somewhere between 80 and 88%, actually is from animals that were stunned before slaughter.
Right. So why is the debate so often framed around halal and non-stun?
It's partly because while many Muslims accept certain forms of stunning, particularly head-only electrical stunning that stuns but doesn't kill the animal before the cut, some interpretations still require no stunning. But critically, kosher shechita never permits stunning. So while much of the halal sector does use stunning, The non-stun debate directly impacts the entire kosher process and a segment of the halal one.
That's a really important distinction. Okay, let's quickly touch on the economics. Is this a significant market?
Oh, definitely. The halal meat market is substantial. The AHDB data pointed out that Muslims, while making up about 6.5% of the UK population, account for around 30% of all lamb consumption. That's huge.
Wow, so a ban could ripple through the agricultural sector.
It certainly could have economic consequences for farmers and the meat industry, yes. The government seems aware of this complex balance. Their official position, according to the House of Commons Library, is that they prefer animals to be stunned, but they respect the legal right to religious slaughter.
And they're supporting things like protocols to check stunning methods are compatible with halal rules.
Yeah, the demonstration of life protocol aims to ensure stunning doesn't kill the animal, addressing some religious concerns while trying to maintain welfare standards. It's complex.
And the debate on June 9th, just to be clear, it's a general debate, not a vote on banning it immediately.
Correct. It's a forum for MPs to discuss the petition and the issues raised, not a legislative vote at this stage. And of course, all slaughterhouses are already supposed to be monitored by vets for welfare compliance. Those sources do note breaches happen sometimes without specifying if it's more common in stun or non-stun facilities.
There was also mention of some non-kosher meat potentially entering the general market.
Yes. The RSPCA in the week mentioned that meat rejected during the kosher process because it doesn't meet the strict standards might sometimes be sold into the mainstream market without specific labeling that it came from a non-stun slaughter.
So wrapping this up, it's clear this isn't a simple issue at all.
Not in the slightest. You've got deeply held religious beliefs and practices, serious animal welfare concerns backed by scientific arguments, significant economic factors, and this added layer of nuance around stunning already being common in much of the halal sector.
It really highlights a fundamental tension. It leaves you thinking, how should societies navigate these clashes between values like religious freedom and evolving standards of animal welfare, especially when the practices themselves aren't uniform?
That's the core question, isn't it? There are no easy answers.